In the summer of 1994, newlyweds Sarah and Michael Chin disappeared without a trace from their honeymoon cabin at Pine Ridge National Forest. Their rental car sat undisturbed in the driveway, wedding rings left on the nightstand, breakfast half-eaten on the kitchen table. The official investigation concluded they'd gotten lost hiking and fallen victim to the wilderness, despite no hiking gear being missing and no trail evidence ever found. For 30 years, the case haunted the small mountain community of Cedar Falls, whispered about in local diners and remembered in faded missing person flyers that still cling to telephone poles. Then, in March 2024, everything changed. Retired park ranger Bill Morrison, 73 and dying of lung cancer, walked into the Cedar Falls Police Department with a confession that would shatter 3 decades of lies and uncover a truth more disturbing than anyone imagined. What he revealed wasn't just about the Chins. It was about a pattern, a system, and secrets buried so deep in the forest that some believe they'd stay hidden forever. If you're into cinematic true crime stories based on real-life disappearances and cold cases finally cracked, subscribe now and tap the bell icon. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Interview Room 2 of the Cedar Falls Police Department as Detective Lisa Reeves studied the man across from her. Bill Morrison looked smaller than she remembered from the old case files. His park ranger uniform long since traded for a worn flannel shirt and jeans that hung loose on his diminished frame. The oxygen tank beside his chair wheezed softly with each breath he took. "You sure you want to do this without a lawyer, Bill?" Detective Reeves asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. She'd known Morrison for years, had even gone to high school with his daughter Amy. This wasn't how she'd expected to spend her Tuesday morning. Morrison's roomy eyes met hers. "I'm dying, Lisa. Cancer's got about 6 months left in me, maybe less. I don't have time for lawyers." He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I can't take this to my grave." The Chun case had been Reeves' first major investigation as a rookie detective in 1994. She'd spent weeks combing through the forest, interviewing locals, following every lead that went nowhere. The official conclusion, that the young couple had wandered off trail and met with some misfortune in the vast wilderness, had never sat right with her, but without evidence, the case had eventually gone cold. "Tell me about Sarah and Michael Chun," she said, pressing record on the digital recorder between them. Morrison closed his eyes, and for a moment, Reeves thought he might have drifted off. Then he began to speak. They arrived on a Friday afternoon, July 15th, 1994. Cabin 7, up on Eagles Ridge. Beautiful spot, overlooks the whole valley. I remember because Sarah kept taking pictures of everything. The view, the cabin, Michael chopping wood for the fireplace even though it was summer. His voice cracked slightly. They were so happy. Just married 3 days before. "You were the one who showed them to the cabin?" "Yeah. Part of my route was checking on the rental properties, making sure everything was in order. The Chins were. They were perfect guests. Quiet, respectful. They'd brought groceries, planned to stay a week." Morrison coughed, a wet sound that made Reeves wince. "They never got the chance." "What happened, Bill?" Morrison's hands shook as he reached for his water glass. "Saturday night, around 11 p.m., I got a call from my supervisor, Tom Garrett. Said there'd been reports of poaching up near Cabin 7. Wanted me to investigate. Poaching was a big problem back then. People would come up from the city, spotlight deer, leave the carcasses to rot." Reeves made a note. Tom Garrett had been interviewed in 1994, but had claimed no knowledge of any poaching reports. "Go on." "I drove up to check it out. Didn't see any poachers, but I noticed the lights were still on in Cabin 7. Figured I'd let the Chins know to keep an eye out. Maybe stay inside for the night." Morrison paused, his breathing labored. "That's when I saw the truck." "What truck?" "Black pickup, parked maybe 50 yards down the service road. Lights off, but I could see someone sitting in the cab. I thought it might be the poachers, so I approached on foot." Morrison's voice dropped to almost a whisper. It was Tom Garrett. Reeves felt her pulse quicken. "Your supervisor was there?" "Yeah, but he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, someone I didn't recognize. Big guy, maybe 6'4", wearing camo. They were watching the cabin." "Did you approach them?" Morrison shook his head. "Something felt wrong. I backed off, hid behind some trees, and watched. Around midnight, the lights in the cabin went out. Everything was quiet for maybe an hour. Then I heard voices." The old man's hands trembled as he continued. "The 2 men got out of the truck and walked toward the cabin. They had flashlights, but they kept them low. I followed at a distance, staying in the tree line. What did you see? They went around to the back of the cabin. There's a sliding door there that leads to the deck. I heard the door open. No breaking glass, no forced entry. They had a key. Reeves leaned forward. This was the first time anyone had suggested the Chin's disappearance wasn't random. Then what? I heard Sarah scream. Just once, then nothing. I wanted to help them. Lisa, I swear I did, but I was outnumbered and unarmed. I thought if I went for help, maybe. Morrison's voice broke. How long were they inside? Maybe 20 minutes. When they came out, they were carrying something heavy, wrapped in the cabin's bed sheets. The big guy had Sarah's purse in his other hand. Did you see Sarah and Michael? Morrison shook his head, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Never saw them come out alive. Detective Reeves felt a chill run down her spine. What did you do? I followed them. They drove about 2 miles up the old logging road to a clearing we called the Boneyard. It's where hunters used to dump deer carcasses. There's a deep ravine there, cuts down into the mountain, maybe 100 feet. And they threw everything over the edge. The bundles, Sarah's purse, everything. Then they burned the sheets and drove off. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and Morrison's labored breathing. Reeves stared at her notes, trying to process what she'd just heard. Why didn't you report this at the time? Morrison's laugh was bitter. Report it to who? Tom Garrett was my supervisor, and he was running the investigation. Monday morning, when the Chins were reported missing, he assigned me to help with the search. We spent weeks looking everywhere except the Boneyard. Who was the other man? I didn't find out until years later. His name was Marcus Webb. He worked private security, sometimes did jobs for wealthy clients who wanted things handled quietly. What kind of jobs? Morrison met her eyes. The kind where people disappear. Detective Reeves felt her phone buzz. A text from the front desk. Media's here. Chin's story leaked. She looked up at Morrison. Bill, this is going to get very complicated very quickly. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for 30 years, he said quietly. But there's more you need to know. More? Morrison nodded. The Chins weren't the first. Detective Reeves felt the walls of the interview room close in around her. What do you mean? They weren't the first. Morrison reached into his jacket pocket with shaking hands and pulled out a worn manila envelope. I've been keeping records for 30 years. Every disappearance, every suspicious death, every time someone asked too many questions about the wrong things. He slid the envelope across the table. Inside were photocopied newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and photographs, some official, some clearly taken in secret. Reeves spread them out, her trained eye immediately cataloging the materials. 1987, Morrison began, pointing to a faded newspaper clipping. Janet Holloway, environmental scientist studying water pollution in the Pine Ridge watershed. She'd been taking samples near the old Apex mining operation when she went missing during a routine research trip. Reeves examined the photo of a young woman in her 30s, earnest smile beneath wire-rimmed glasses. The headline read, Researcher missing after solo hike. 1991, Morrison continued. David and Patricia Moreau, investigative journalists from Portland. They were working on a story about illegal dumping in national forests. Rented a cabin for 2 weeks to conduct interviews with locals. Another clipping, another smiling couple. Bodies never recovered in tragic hiking accident. 1993, Morrison's voice grew hoarse. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, geologist. She'd discovered something in the mineral composition of the soil near the old mining sites. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Reeves counted the clippings. 7 different cases spanning from 1987 to 1999. All ruled accidental deaths or missing persons. All involving people who might have stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen. Bill, what connects all these cases besides the location? Morrison coughed violently, blood speckling his handkerchief. When he recovered, his eyes were grim. They were all asking questions about Apex Mining Corporation. The name sent a jolt through Reeves' memory. Apex had been a major employer in Cedar Falls throughout the 1970s and 80s, running copper and silver extraction operations throughout Pine Ridge National Forest under special government permits. The company had closed its operations in 1989 following environmental concerns, but not before making several prominent local families very wealthy. The Garrett family owned a significant stake in Apex, Morrison continued. Tom Garrett's father was on the board of directors. When the EPA started sniffing around in the late 80s, asking questions about groundwater contamination and illegal waste disposal, certain people got very nervous. So they started eliminating anyone who might expose them. It was more sophisticated than that. Tom Garrett had connections throughout the Park Service, local law enforcement, even the coroner's office. When someone became a problem, they'd arrange for an accident in the wilderness. Who's going to question a hiking mishap in thousands of acres of remote forest? Detective Reeves' phone buzzed again. This time it was her partner, Detective Rodriguez, medical examiner en route to Boneyard. News crews setting up outside. Chief wants to see you ASAP. She looked up at Morrison. We need to recover evidence from this ravine before the media circus makes it impossible. There's something else, Morrison said, his voice urgent. The operation didn't end with Apex. It evolved. He pulled out another set of documents, more recent, some dated within the last 5 years. Missing hikers, researchers, anyone who wandered too close to certain areas of the forest. The pattern never stopped. It just got more careful. Who's running it now? Tom Garrett died in 2003, but his son Derek took over. He's the current forest superintendent. Marcus Webb disappeared around the same time, but there are others. It's become a service they provide, wealthy clients, political figures, corporate executives who need problems to vanish permanently. Detective Reeves stood up, her mind racing. Bill, I need you to stay here while we verify this information. Do not talk to anyone else. Do not leave this building. Do you understand? Morrison nodded. There's one more thing you need to know. About why I'm coming forward now. What? 3 weeks ago, a young couple from Seattle checked into Cabin 7. Environmental lawyers named Jennifer and Adam Santos. They were researching groundwater contamination for a class action lawsuit against several former mining companies. Reeves felt her blood turn cold. Where are they now? They were supposed to check out last Sunday. Their rental car is still in the driveway. The boneyard was exactly as Morrison had described. A natural clearing where the forest floor dropped away into a jagged ravine that cut deep into the mountainside. Dr. Sarah Chun, the county medical examiner, directed her team as they rappelled into the gorge while Detective Reeves and her partner watched from above. Visibilities poured down here, came the voice through the radio. But we're finding scattered remains consistent with multiple individuals. Clothing fragments, personal effects. This is definitely a dump site. Detective Rodriguez whistled low. 30 years of evidence down there. Detective Reeves? The radio crackled again. We found something you need to see. 20 minutes later, Dr. Chun emerged from the ravine holding an evidence bag. Inside was a purse, leather darkened with age but still intact. Through the clear plastic, Reeves could see a wallet, and inside the wallet, a driver's license with Sarah Chin's smiling face. There are at least 6 other purses down there, Dr. Chin reported. Various states of decomposition, but several still have identification. I've also recovered jewelry, watches, clothing items, and what appears to be camera equipment. How many bodies? Skeletal remains are scattered, but preliminary count suggests at least 8 individuals. We'll need weeks to sort through everything properly. Reeves' radio buzzed. Detective, this is dispatch. We've got a situation at Forest Headquarters. Derek Garrett is demanding to speak with whoever's in charge of the Chun investigation. Tell him I'll be there in 20 minutes, Reeves replied. She turned to Rodriguez. Secure this scene. No one in or out without my authorization. And give me a warrant for Derek Garrett's office. Forest Headquarters sat on the edge of Cedar Falls like a fortress of stone and timber, its parking lot now crowded with news vans and police vehicles. Derek Garrett waited in the lobby, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from a lifetime of authority. Detective Reeves, he said, extending his hand. I understand there's been some wild accusations made about my father and our operations here. I'd like to clear the air. Reeves ignored the offered handshake. Mr. Garrett, you're not under arrest at this time, but I'd strongly advise you to have legal representation before we speak. Garrett's smile never wavered. I have nothing to hide. My family has served this community for generations. If there are questions about old cases, I'm happy to help clarify any misunderstandings. What about Jennifer and Adam Santos? For just a moment, Garrett's composure slipped. I'm sorry, who? Environmental lawyers from Seattle. They checked into Cabin 7 last week to research groundwater contamination. They were supposed to check out Sunday, but their car is still there and no one's seen them since Thursday. I'm not personally involved in cabin rentals. That would be handled by our booking department. Detective Reeves studied his face. Funny thing is, according to our records, you personally approved their extended stay when they called Friday night. Just like your father approved extended stays for several other missing persons over the years. Garrett's jaw tightened. I think this conversation is over. Actually, it's just beginning. Reeves pulled out her phone and showed him a photo Dr. Chun had sent from the ravine, Sarah Chin's driver's license in the evidence bag. We found the Chins, Derek. We found all of them. The color drained from Garrett's face. I want my lawyer. Smart choice. Derek Garrett, you're under arrest for conspiracy in the murders of Sarah and Michael Chun, and we're just getting started. Back at the station, Morrison was waiting in the same interview room, now connected to a portable four-drip. Detective Reeves sat down across from him, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. We found them, she said simply. Sarah and Michael, and the others. You were right about everything. Morrison closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. Thank God. Derek Garrett's in custody, but he's lawyered up tight. We need more evidence to connect him to the recent disappearances. What can you tell me about the Santos couple? Morrison opened his eyes, fear flickering in their depths. I saw Derek's truck near Cabin 7 last Thursday night. Same pattern as before, late night, no official reason to be there. Did you follow him? I'm dying, Lisa. I couldn't make that hike anymore. But I called the Santos room from the ranger station. No answer. Why didn't you call us then? Morrison's laugh was bitter. Because I've spent 30 years being a coward. 30 years watching people die because I was too scared to speak up. I couldn't live with myself anymore, but I was still too scared to act. Detective Reeves leaned forward. Bill, if the Santos couple is still alive, we need to find them quickly. Where would Derek take them? Morrison thought for a moment. There's an old mining facility about 12 miles north of the boneyard. Apex used to store equipment there, but it's been abandoned since the company folded. If Derek's following his father's playbook, that's where he'd take them to wait. Wait for what? For the heat to die down. For the search to move away from the area. Tom used to keep people there for days sometimes, until he was sure it was safe to move them to the boneyard. Reeves was already reaching for her radio. All units, we need immediate response to the old Apex mining facility, coordinates. She paused, looking at Morrison. Mile marker 23, on Forest Road 147, then 2 miles up the service trail. But Lisa, Morrison grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Derek won't go quietly, and if he knows we're coming, he'll make sure there are no witnesses left to testify. As Detective Reeves rushed out of the interview room, Morrison called after her. There's a back entrance through the old ventilation shaft. It's hidden behind the maintenance building. That's how they moved people in and out without being seen. The last thing Reeves heard as the door closed was Morrison's voice, barely a whisper. Bring them home. The old Apex mining facility emerged from the forest like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast, its rusted metal framework and crumbling concrete foundations overgrown with 30 years of pine and bracken. Detective Reeves crouched behind a fallen log with her tactical team, studying the structure through binoculars as dusk settled over the mountains. I count 2 vehicles, whispered Sergeant Mills, the SWAT team leader. Derek Garrett's Forest Service truck and a white sedan matches the rental description for the Santos couple. Through her binoculars, Reeves could see light flickering in what had once been the main processing building. Morrison said there was a back entrance through the ventilation system. How long to get your team in position? Give me 15 minutes to circle around. But detective, if they're holding hostages in there. I know. No heroics. We get the Santos out alive, and we get Derek Garrett in custody to face justice for 30 years of murder. As the SWAT team melted into the forest, Reeves' radio crackled. Detective, this is Dr. Chun at the boneyard. We've made positive identification on 6 of the victims so far. The dental records confirm Sarah and Michael Chun, Janet Holloway, the Morrow couple, and Dr. Rodriguez. We're also finding evidence of systematic disposal. These weren't random killings. Understood. Keep processing the scene. We may have 2 more victims to prevent. Reeves checked her watch. 7:42 p.m. The Santos had been missing for 5 days now. If Derek was following his father's pattern, he'd be getting ready to move them soon. Her phone buzzed with a text from the station. Morrison collapsed. Rush to hospital. Said to tell you. Watch for the tripwires. Damn, she muttered. Even dying, the old ranger was trying to keep her safe. Inside the mining facility, Jennifer Santos pressed her ear against the cold concrete wall of their makeshift prison. The room had once been some kind of equipment storage area, windowless and isolated deep within the building's maze of corridors. She and her husband Adam had been held here since Thursday night, given minimal food and water, forced to use a bucket in the corner for basic needs. Jen, Adam whispered from where he sat against the opposite wall, his wrists still zip-tied behind his back. Do you hear that? She listened carefully. Over the constant drip of water somewhere in the darkness, she could hear footsteps approaching. Heavy boots on concrete, growing closer. The metal door opened with a screech, and Derek Garrett stepped inside, carrying a battery-powered lantern. He looked different than he had during their brief meeting at the ranger station when they'd first arrived, disheveled, unshaven, with the wild eyes of a man under enormous pressure. Time to go, he said simply. Where are you taking us? Jennifer demanded, struggling to her feet despite her bound hands. Garrett's smile was cold. Somewhere you can't cause any more trouble. You environmental lawyers are all the same. You think you can come into our community and destroy everything we've built based on some water samples and old documents. People have a right to know if their groundwater has been contaminated, Adam said, his voice hoarse. Children are getting sick in Cedar Falls. Cancer rates are. Spare me the speech, Garrett cut him off. My family has protected this community for 50 years. We've provided jobs, brought in tourism revenue, maintained the forest. So what if a few busybodies had to disappear along the way? The greater good sometimes requires difficult choices. He gestured with the pistol he carried in his other hand. Now move. Both of you. As they were herded down the dark corridor, Jennifer caught a glimpse of something that made her heart race. A tiny red light blinking near the ceiling. A security camera, still active after all these years. Someone might be watching. Detective Reeves received the SWAT team's confirmation at 8:15 p.m. We're in position at the rear entrance. Thermal imaging shows 3 heat signatures in the main building, moving toward the eastern exit. He's moving them, she said into her radio. All units, converge on the eastern perimeter. Do not let that vehicle leave the facility. She sprinted through the undergrowth, her flashlight beam dancing across the rusted metal and crumbling concrete. As she rounded the corner of the main building, she saw Derek Garrett emerging from a side door, pushing Jennifer and Adam Santos ahead of him at gunpoint. Derek Garrett, this is the Cedar Falls Police Department. Drop your weapon. Garrett spun toward her voice, using Jennifer as a human shield. Stay back, detective. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I know about the Chens, Reeves called out, keeping her service weapon trained on Garrett while looking for a clear shot. I know about all of them. It's over, Derek. You think this is just about me? Garrett laughed bitterly. You think I'm some kind of lone psychopath? This operation has protected hundreds of millions of dollars in assets for people who could buy and sell this entire county. You have no idea how deep this goes. Then tell me. Help us understand. Garrett's grip tightened on Jennifer, who was struggling to breathe with his arm across her throat. The mining contamination was just the beginning. Apex was dumping chemical waste for companies across 3 states. Military contractors, pharmaceutical companies, anyone willing to pay premium rates for guaranteed disposal with no questions asked. So you murdered anyone who got too close to the truth. We eliminated threats to national economic interests, Garrett corrected. Do you know how many jobs would be lost if the full extent of the contamination came out? How many lawsuits would bankrupt legitimate businesses? Sometimes the individual has to be sacrificed for the greater good. From the forest around them, red laser dots began appearing on Garrett's chest and arms. The SWAT team had him surrounded. Derek, Reeves said, her voice calm and steady. Look around you. It's over. Let Jennifer and Adam go, and we can work something out. You want to work something out? Garrett's voice rose to a near shriek. Then call off your dogs and let me walk away. Otherwise, these 2 environmental terrorists join all the others at the bottom of the ravine. That's when Adam Santos made his move. Despite his bound hands, he threw himself sideways into Garrett, breaking the man's grip on his wife and sending both men tumbling to the ground. The pistol went off, the shot echoing through the forest. Take him down, Reeves shouted. The SWAT team converged instantly. Within seconds, Derek Garrett was face down in the dirt with 3 officers on top of him, his weapon kicked away into the darkness. Jennifer Santos fell to her knees, sobbing with relief as Detective Rodriguez cut the zip ties from her wrists. "Are you hurt?" Rodriguez asked gently. "No," Jennifer gasped. "But he told us things about other people. There are records hidden in the facility. Financial documents, lists of names, communication logs. Everything's documented." The hidden office was discovered 3 hours later, concealed behind a false wall in what had once been the mining facility's administrative building. Inside, the investigative team found 30 years of meticulous record-keeping that painted a picture of corruption and murder spanning multiple states and involving dozens of prominent figures. Detective Reeves stood amid the evidence with FBI agent Sarah Martinez, who had arrived from Portland to take over the federal aspects of the case. File cabinets lined the walls, each drawer carefully labeled by year and case type. "This is extraordinary," Agent Martinez said, photographing a ledger that detailed payments to various officials. "We're looking at senators, federal judges, Fortune 500 executives. The scope of this conspiracy is unprecedented." "Look at this," Reeves said, holding up a file marked Active Threats 2024. Inside were surveillance photos and detailed dossiers on dozens of environmental scientists, journalists, and lawyers working on contamination cases across the Pacific Northwest. They weren't just covering up past crimes, they were actively planning future ones. A separate folder contained what appeared to be a client list, wealthy individuals and corporations who had paid the Garrett organization to eliminate specific problems. The fees ranged from $50,000 for simple intimidation to $500,000 for permanent solutions. Jennifer and Adam Santos were scheduled for Resolution Level 5 this weekend, Agent Martinez read from a planning document. The fee was $750,000, paid by something called Alpine Environmental Solutions. Reeves pulled out her phone and called the station. "I need a full corporate background check on Alpine Environmental Solutions, priority urgent." While they waited for the information, Dr. Chin's voice came through the radio from the boneyard. "Detective, we've recovered a total of 11 sets of remains from the ravine. Based on personal effects and preliminary analysis, the victims spanned from 1987 to 2019. We've also found evidence of accelerants used to destroy clothing and organic matter. This was a sophisticated disposal operation." 11 people, Reeves said quietly. 11 families who never got closure. Her phone rang. "Detective Reeves? This is Officer Williams at the station. Alpine Environmental Solutions is a shell company registered in Delaware. But we traced the beneficial ownership through 3 layers of corporations. It belongs to Marcus Webb." "Marcus Webb?" Morrison said he disappeared in 2003. "Apparently not. He's been operating under the name Mark Warren since 2004. Runs a private security firm called Cascade Solutions out of Seattle. And detective? He's got contracts with half the Fortune 500. Agent Martinez looked up from another file folder. "We need to move fast. According to these documents, there are active operations planned in Oregon and Northern California within the next 2 weeks." 3 months later, Detective Reeves sat in the witness chair of Federal District Court in Portland, facing a packed courtroom. Derek Garrett, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and shackled at the ankles, sat at the defendant's table beside his high-powered legal team. "Detective Reeves," the prosecutor said, "in your investigation of the Pine Ridge murder conspiracy, how many victims have you been able to identify?" 14 confirmed victims spanning from 1987 to 2024, Reeves replied. 11 sets of remains recovered from the boneyard, plus Sarah and Michael Chun, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez, whose body was found in a separate location based on information in Derek Garrett's files. "And how many people have been arrested in connection with this conspiracy?" 17 so far, including Derek Garrett, Marcus Webb, also known as Mark Warren, 3 current and former federal officials, 2 state judges, and several corporate executives. The investigation is ongoing. In the gallery, she could see Bill Morrison's daughter Amy, who had become a victims' rights advocate since her father's death 6 weeks earlier. Morrison had lived just long enough to see Derek Garrett's arrest, passing away peacefully in his hospital bed with the knowledge that his 30-year burden of guilt had finally been lifted. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. "Detective Reeves, Isn't it true that my client was coerced into participating in this alleged conspiracy by threats against his family? Your client personally murdered at least 6 people over a span of 15 years, Reeves replied firmly. The evidence shows he wasn't coerced. He was a willing participant who profited enormously from these crimes. But the operation was begun by his father. The operation was continued and expanded by Derek Garrett long after his father's death. He turned it into a profitable business, serving wealthy clients across multiple states. This wasn't family loyalty. It was greed and callous disregard for human life. Jennifer and Adam Santos sat in the front row, holding hands as they listened to the testimony that would hopefully deliver justice for all the victims. Their lawsuit against the companies responsible for the contamination had grown into a class action case representing over 3,000 residents of Cedar Falls and surrounding communities. Detective, the prosecutor continued, what was the total amount of money that flowed through this operation over 30 years? Based on financial records recovered from the mining facility, we estimate over $50 million in payments to the Garrett organization, with additional millions paid to corrupt officials and disposal specialists. The trial would continue for 6 more weeks. Derek Garrett would ultimately be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus Webb, captured in a dramatic raid on his Seattle compound, received multiple life sentences. 14 other conspirators received sentences ranging from 15 years to life. 1 year later, Detective Reeves stood at the edge of the boneyard, which had been transformed into a memorial garden. 14 granite markers bore the names of the victims, surrounded by native wildflowers and a peaceful walking path. A larger stone at the center simply read, "In memory of those who sought truth and paid the ultimate price." The cleanup of Pine Ridge National Forest was ongoing, with several mining sites undergoing full environmental remediation. The apex contamination had indeed affected groundwater across a wide area, but early intervention based on the recovered documents had prevented a much larger environmental disaster. Jennifer Santos approached, carrying a small bouquet of mountain laurel. Detective Reeves, I wanted to thank you again. How are you and Adam doing? Better. The nightmares are getting less frequent. In our work, the lawsuit settlement will fund the cleanup and provide medical monitoring for everyone affected by the contamination. It's not enough to bring back the people who died, but maybe it will prevent others from suffering. As the sun set over the mountains, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, Detective Reeves thought about Bill Morrison's final words to her before he died. Truth has a way of surfacing, even when people try to bury it deep. Sometimes it just takes someone brave enough to dig. The Cedar Falls community had been shattered by the revelations, but they had also found strength in facing the truth. The Forest Service had been reorganized under federal oversight. New environmental protections had been put in place. And most importantly, the families of 14 victims finally had closure. As Reeves walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a message from the FBI task force. New lead on similar operation in Montana. Can you consult? She looked back at the memorial one more time, then typed her response. On my way. The work of seeking justice never ended, but neither did the determination of those who refused to let the truth stay buried.